Thank you. Thanks, Holger. Thank you very much for inviting me along to have a chat with you. Very excited. Where can we start? Shall I tell you about a little bit about my background? So I'm a Greek Australian. I was born in Australia. I come from a foodie family. So my father was a Greek fisherman, and so eating and good food and good fresh food was also was kind of part of our culture. It was also a vehicle for communication and a reason for getting friends and family around. So it was always part of where I come from. We used to have quite a few people come over on the weekends. We used to always have parties, and so food was kind of took centre stage, I suppose. And I guess in my late teens, I moved to Melbourne and I started working for my uncle in a seafood restaurant. So that's where I sort of continued on my connection with food. So I became a chef, and I trained under him for over 12 months, and then I decided to broaden my horizons. And I worked in various restaurants throughout Melbourne. And then after 4 or 5 years, I decided to broaden my horizons even further, and I moved to Tokyo. So that was back a long time ago, actually, back in 1997. Giving away my age there a little bit, Holger. So yeah, I moved over there, and I was working in an international restaurant there. Worked there for a couple of years, and that's where I met my wife, Malou Berger, who is a food photographer. And then we started traveling together, moved over to London for the first time. I worked in the gastro pub scene when it started up in sort of the late 90s into 2000, and then I moved back to Australia, and then Lou followed me. We got married, and then we decided to come back over to Europe again. And then at that stage, Malou mentioned to me about getting into food styling. And at that stage of my life, I kind of had enough of working in restaurant kitchens. It's pretty hard work, very rewarding, but also, you're working weekends, you're working evenings. It's very difficult when you're starting a family as well. And at that point, I took the plunge and started assisting people. So as an assistant food stylist, I tried to track down the best food stylists in the industry, and I worked for them during periods of time. I felt it was good to do longer stints with food stylists as opposed to chopping and changing, and then gradually I started getting my own jobs, and it kind of went on from there.
I see. Could I ask your wife at the time when you met her, was she already an established food photographer?
No, she was working as an assistant photographer, and she was assisting on fashion shoots, and so it was just fate that brought us together. Yeah.
And your time in Tokyo, would you say has that shaped your view on food and presentation to a certain degree? Because I think like there can be something very minimalistic in Asian, or particularly in Japanese, like food styling, like the way that certain bits are appreciated. Would you say that has made a long-lasting impression on your career?
Yeah, I think it's definitely shaped the way that I look at food. I mean, I've always had, Australia geographically is very close to Asia, so we have a real connection there. I personally I love Asian food because it is quite minimal. Yeah, well, let's say Japanese, for instance. It's quite minimal. It's about really high quality product, and it's also about kind of showcasing the food as it is. So it's different. It's a different type of kind of presenting food.
I see. And what made you move to London?
I'd always wanted to move to London. I think it was, when I started working as a chef, the sort of one of my heroes was Marco Pierre White, and so you had Marco Pierre White, you had Gordon Ramsay, Raymond Blanc, all these guys who kind of come over here and were Michelin star chefs. So I sort of, for me, London was kind of like the place to come and be a chef. So yeah, that was my connection.
Super good. Could you show us some of your work? It's really interesting to see, and I would just die to get some insight into how you style your products.
Sure.
I remember, so I've only worked with food stylists a few times, and they basically said those days when the food was literally like inedible, they said, at least from their perspective, those days were over. So when things basically like were, just like glazed with chemicals, etc. Would you say that you stay relatively naturalistic? So is your food actually edible after the photo shoot?
Look, I always say to people, I wouldn't. The food is edible at the point where there's the shots taken.
Mm-hmm.
So after the food's been sort of tampered with, you've got to remember that we've been sort of tampering with tweezers or cotton buds, not necessarily painting it with any kind of chemicals or anything like that. But if you've had a bowl of prawns that's been sitting there for 4 hours, you don't want to eat it. And that's the way I say. I always say it's edible at the point where we shoot it. So yeah, would you? Shall I share my screen and we'll have a look?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So this first image here, this is for a client called Longbottom, and they produce an amazing hot sauce. It's a bespoke hot sauce. It's not mass produced. It's produced here in the UK. I'm not plugging them, by the way. And they also do a really good Virgin Mary mix. So it's kind of like a can with tomato juice, horseradish, pepper, blah blah blah, Worcester. So you can mix it straight away with your vodka. So what we did here was this is with Malou Berger. My wife Malou Berger, a food photographer. So this was a bit of a homage to still life, obviously. And we wanted something that was kind of quite decadent, a bit messy, it might have been like a bit of a boozy afternoon. But we kind of, I just love it. I just really love it. And it stinks of still life to me. You can almost smell the crab. It's great. And for this shot, I went down to. This is during COVID lockdown, by the way, as well. So it had its challenges because I had to go to Covent Garden fishmongers in High Street. Just off Acton, anyway. And I had to go and get the crabs. I spoke to my fishmonger on the phone. I said, look, I need crabs. I need king crabs because the king crabs have got the bigger claws. I need lobsters. He said, oh, we can't get lobsters. I said, well, can you get them? And these are some of the challenges of being a food stylist. You've got to be able to have really, really good suppliers. So, if you can't get king crabs from one supplier, you have to ring somebody else. We'll talk through some other images and we can talk about things. But, I've got my king crabs, I've got my lobsters, I've got my oysters. There's some really nice detail in there. And, with each shot, we do a couple of different variations. So we might do a portrait, we might do a landscape. You see, down the can that's on the right-hand side of the image, we've got a little bit of spillage there. So we might do one with spillage and we might do one shot without spillage. So because the client might decide that they don't want it as messy. So we always kind of stage the shots as well.
I think what's particularly interesting in this shot is that it really visualizes the experience of eating. So instead of presenting just a perfect product, pristine and it all in all its glory, what this actually shows is the experience itself.
Absolutely.
And I think and I think that's the reason why this is so this is so engaging. You can literally taste the food, I think.
Yeah. You can visualize yourself being there. Actually, I think and that's I think that's why it's such a nice image.
Yeah. Can you maybe talk about the work with the photographer on, let's say, like a set like this one here? So obviously someone needs to decide, let's say, where to place the lemon, etc. Is there a hierarchy? I know.
There is. I mean, and every job is different depending on the style of photography. So if it's editorial or advertising or moving image, you have a hierarchy in terms of who calls the shots. This shot and this project was unique because essentially it was the photographer and myself working together. And we were shooting remotely. So each shot we took was sent through to the client, who was an art director who was looking after the project, and then she would then pass the information on directly to the client. In terms of where we put things around, so we'd have a kind of let's have an idea of how we would put things together. And then I'd sort of put a few things down, and then Malou, the photographer, she'd say, well, how's about we try the can on the left or can on the right? And I'd say, well, I'm not sure. And when you have a good relationship, and you should have a good relationship or working relationship with someone, but this is something that takes time, but at the same time, I'm a firm believer of looking through the lens. So I always say, if I'm working with a photographer I've never worked before, I'll say, look, do you mind if I come and have a look? So I'll take my glasses off and I'll have a look, just so you can see where things are placed. Because a photographer's got a vision, and they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, well, I think we should have the lemon there. And as a food stylist, I think it is your responsibility also to share that vision with them and look through the camera lens and say, yeah, you know what, you're right, that looks really good there. And if you don't think it's right, you've got to be able to, it's about delivery. It's about how you deliver that information. It's about how you say, well, yeah, I think it looks, as opposed to saying, no, that doesn't work, you would say, do you know what, Holger? Or, I think that works really well there, that lemon, but let's just try it over here. And if it doesn't work, we'll put it back. So that way, it's kind of negotiating your creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also you would normally work with someone or collaborate with someone who you respect for their own skill sets.
Absolutely.
So, following their advice usually is actually a really good thing, because that's the reason why you work with them in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's such a fast-paced industry out there, and there are so many jobs going on, and there are a lot of photographers out there, food photographers, and there are a lot of food stylists. But I think it's really important that you have mutual respect, and I think it's important to, don't be too strong of a personality straight off the bat. You've got to be humble with people, and it's primarily it's the photographer's job. It's their shoot. It's they're shooting the creative that comes from whether it's a production house or an agency or whether it comes directly from the client. But equally, it's the food stylist who brings the food to the set. And you've got to respect the photographer, and also the photographer has to sort of understand what your creative input is. That's why you get paid. A food stylist's job is to help to bring food to life.
Cool.
Cool. Should we move on?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Okay, I've just done a little bit of a blurb here. Sorry. It's a little, yeah. So I've worked with some fantastic brands. So I've worked, some of the brands I've worked with Costa Coffee. So I do a lot of, I've done in the past a lot of work with their kind of iced coffees and coffees with cream, because that requires a stylist know-how and how to get that nice kind of cream swirl. Marks and Spencers, I've done quite a lot of work for them, e-commerce and their advertising. Starbucks also, I've done some work for. Walker's Crisps. These are brands I've worked with recently as well. Quakers, Waitrose, Strongbow, Thornton's Chocolates. I've done quite a bit of work with Thornton's, which is quite intricate work, and you've got to have quite a steady hand. So yeah, this is a really, I love this image. This image I worked on. It was an editorial shot for a cookbook that we did, that was commissioned by a royal family for a chef that used to work for them. It's a pomegranate and edamame salad. It's very vibrant. It's very colourful. It's a flat lay shot. We call it flat lay or overhead. I think either or. It's the same shot. I think there's been a bit of a shift in terms of food styling over the last couple of years. A lot more flat lay shots are being produced. I think there's a bit of a divide amongst, I wouldn't say divide, but there are different opinions amongst the food stylist fraternity, because a lot of us are saying, oh well, it doesn't require as much effort, because the 3/4 shot, you've got different things to consider. You've got angle as well as back, the shot back, etc. Whereas a flat lay is just kind of, might have a lighting from the right or from the left or over here. So, but I think it still requires quite a lot of skill, because it's still kind of two-dimensional, right? So you've got all these kind of colours and shapes here, and it's quite a beautiful dish, right?
Absolutely. Do you think the fact that flat lays became more popular has something to do with the rise of social media? Because
absolutely,
yeah, I think
absolutely,
something like this is very, social media is very fast paced. You need to be able to consume content very quickly and efficiently, and to a certain degree, like a flat lay is, it's slightly decontextualizing something. You just see this one perspective, and then it's very, very easy to consume, and it just has an immediate impact.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because there has been a real shift, and I think it has been driven by social media. And I do think there are some dangers there as well, and that's kind of reflected on our industry. Gradually, our industry is changing in terms, and that relates directly to the amount of shots that are required to do in a day, and and also there are a number of reasons. There are a number of things as well, especially with social content. Social content is being used quite a lot as a reference for briefs. You're seeing it more and more. A lot of things are being pulled off social media to be used as kind of brief references, and that has its dangers as well, because something that's been produced, because there's so much content out there, and it just gets pulled off and say, oh, well, can you do this or can you do that? And you sort of say, well, yeah, that's okay, but that's editorial and we're doing advertising, and that's really loose. But advertising, it's got its kind of, it's kind of constraints in terms of, there are variables you have to consider. The amount of product that you use, is there are guidelines, the amount of sugar in products, etc. All those sorts of things come into play when you're shooting for advertising. Editorial is so much looser, and when you've got more, more access to things like that, it makes our job more challenging. And on top of that, as opposed to, say, we were doing, I don't know, let's say 4 shots a day, people are expecting to do double that amount, triple that amount, because they don't understand, they can't quantify what it means for us to, as professionals, as food stylists and photographers, how much time it takes for us to produce an image.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one. You break your days down. People are turning around and say, "Oh, well, can you do 12 or 15 shots in a day?" And this, if you break your day down from 9 till 6, well, it generally takes you about an hour to set up. So that's 10 to 6. So that's your 8 hours straight away. So 15 shots, you do the math straight away. It doesn't really leave you much time per hour, does it? And then you haven't included lunch either. Sorry, Holger, you've got me started now.
No, that's all good. Yeah,
I'm trying to defend us. I'm trying to look after us.
Yeah, no. I think that is really important. Yeah. Let's have a look at the next slide.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I've gone a bit off piece there. I must apologise. So I've done just a little thing here, a day in the life of a food stylist. So, I might get a call from my agent, Jules, who's at Salt and Spoon. Sorry, a little plug there for you. So she'll sort of say, hey, are you available on this date? There's a job that's come in for, a salmon producer in Scotland. So, yeah, sure, I'm available. And she'll say you'll get an email through from the client or a call, and then I'll speak to the client. Will give me a call and say, hi, how you going? We've got this shoot coming up. We're glad that you've come on board. So yeah, great. And I'll say, please, can you send me a brief so I can see what we're doing for the day? In the brief will come through. It might be in the form of a deck, so it might just be some ideas that they've got. At that point, I'll say, how many shots have you got? And if I think it's achievable or unachievable, I'll go back to my agent and say, hey, Jules, it's an 8-shot day. It's editorial. That sounds pretty good. If it's 4 shots advertising, yeah, it sounds good. If it's unachievable, I might turn around and say, listen, do you know what? That's quite a big day. I don't mind working a longer day, or, is it going to be split over 2 days? Who's the photographer? Who's the creative? Have I worked with them before? You have to think about all those things. There's so much prep. Once again, as a food stylist and also as a photographer, as you know, before you even get into the shoot, because we have to problem solve every little thing before we get in there, so that once we get in on the day, everything's smooth. As I've sort of said, have a look at the brief, discuss the job, make recommendations. I'm doing a job where they've made said recommendations. It's Italian food, so I've turned around and said, well, I made a list of Italian foods. That goes back to the client. The client say yes, 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 no, 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 no. So then my prep list gets smaller, and then I write a prep list the night before I go to shop. I don't write on the day because often, if I'm as a food stylist, I'm hired out for a day. If it's 2 days or 3 days, I might get 1 day of prep. If it's 1 day, I'll generally get half a day of prep. But still, going back to what we were talking about before, people can't quantify how much time it takes to do things. So if I get up at 7 o'clock, and I know this sounds a bit crazy, but if I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I prep from 8 till 9 to write my prep lists. I get out at 9. It means that, if I've got to shop around for, king crabs, for instance, or something, and I've got to drive around, and that half a day turns into a full day generally. So I'll do my prep list the day before, leave the house at 8, and then I'll be back by 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. And that, you've got to set yourself boundaries, basically. It's really important because you're only getting paid for a certain amount of time. And if you start going over all the time, then that goes over into another job because we're busy. So we do 4 or 5 days a week. That goes over and over and over and over, and you've got to manage your time. That's another really important thing as a food stylist. You have to manage your own time, and then on the day, so I've gone out and done my prep. I've got a car full of shopping. I've got to bring that home. If it's a small still shoot, I'll generally bring it home. I'll put it into my fridge. I've got 2 fridges, so I've got a fridge that I've got the stuff for our house. I've also got a big fridge that I use for my shoots, because I don't want to leave my stuff and I don't want to leave my produce in the back of the car. It's got to be fresh. Often I might get a phone call at 8 o'clock that night, the night before, saying, "Can you get some lemons for us, please? Because we need lemons. The prop stylist said we need lemons." And I'll say, I won't go, "Oh no, I'm not going to get the lemons." I'll say, "Yeah, sure, not a problem." You've got to be a swan, graceful on top, but paddling like mad underneath. So I'll drive out at 9 o'clock at night, and I'll go to the shop and I'll buy lemons and I'll bring them back, and I'll do that. Or failing that, I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning because I know I've got to be at the shop, the shoot at 9, and I'll stop off at the supermarket on the way through. A really good thing is you'll never get remembered for a job that you do well, but you always get remembered for the job that you don't do well. And that's a funny thing. It sounds funny, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So anyway, talking about this, go back to this image. Sorry. So I really love this image. Once again, it's a flat lay. It's wholemeal pasta with smoked salmon. I've made a salsa verde, which is a green sauce, and it's basically dill, capers, garlic, olive oil, a little bit of lime juice. It's a really fresh. It's a super duper image. I love it, and it's really relaxed. Once again, it's editorial.
Can I ask so I mean, for me, so the magic of food photography is that you want to eat it. So if I see a well-made food photograph, I think it should make me want to eat it. And also, I would say a good or a well-made food photograph tells me how the food would actually taste like. And for example, this dish here, this photograph here does exactly that. So without actually eating it, I think in my mind I can exactly tell how this is going to taste like, right? Like the dill. And for me, let's say like those capers, for example, are really important. Do you get like a specific brief for this to do this trick? Or is that something that you improvise?
I do a lot of improvisation. I do. It's very creative, food styling, and it's a wonderful thing. And particularly with editorial, there is a little bit more flexibility. So I kind of you really do feel the food, and yeah, you very rightly said, like the caper berries there, they're quite nice there, and I've cooked the way I've cooked the salmon. You can see up the top, it's been nicely kind of browned off, but you can see it's still quite pink inside. And just the swirls in the spaghetti, it all kind of flows, and it looks tasty. It looks tasty. So yeah, thank you. Shall I move on to the next image? Right, okay. So we're back on seafood again. My apologies. So yeah, so there's types of jobs. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I put 5 different types. So there's editorial, which is quite loose, and then you've got advertising, packaging. Packaging, advertising is one and the same. TV commercials, cookbooks. Cookbooks is kind of editorial, but it's it's the same sort of thing. So each job is different. So yeah, so your editorial is kind of might be a magazine. Well, it's editorial, so that kind of speaks for itself. You'll get a recipe come through, and then you kind of you have to follow the recipe essentially, and then you look at. So I use a lot of magazines as references. I look and see what the trends are with food, and magazines, overseas magazines as well. So see what's going on globally, as well as social media. And then you might take a little bit from that, and then what you might do is you might try it out on the next shoot. So this image here is it's a cracked crab, I think. Yeah, what we did for a cookbook that I was working on, that was for a royal family as well. And so the spring onion there, what I've done with it is I just tried it. I thought I'll try this because I think it'll be nice. It's quite an Asian sort of feel to it. So what I did was I just kind of finely scored the spring onion, then I put in ice water and I put it in the fridge for half an hour, pull it out, it's all kind of come together, and I've sort of put that in around the crab just before we shot it. And obviously you can see the way the light hits it from the left, it kind of pops. So it helps to elevate the dish and make it look more appetizing. With advertising, you generally work for it can be big brands, might be a brand like Heinz or something like that. There are a lot of sort of constraints, as I said to you before, that you have to follow. There's serving sizes, so you've got to make sure that, say, if it's a pot of beans, baked beans, you've got to make sure that you're representing a serving size. It can't be too big. Obviously, advertising, like the big burger brands, it's got to, what you're actually styling has to kind of represent what the serving size is. TV commercials are completely different, not completely different, but a different kettle of fish. You're going into sometimes really big shoots where there's, say, 40 or 50 crew, and you are liaising with the first assistant director, the producer. You might have 12 or 15 clients there. It's quite challenging, but it's also quite rewarding, because you get in, you do the job, it's fast paced, and then you get out, and then you move on to the next one. It might be a 1 or 2 day shoot. It's different to, say, doing, you might do 5 days on a trot on stills, or you might do 1 day on the trot on stills. So it's all kind of different, because I've got photographers that I work with on a regular basis, and I also know people within the moving image industry that I work with on TV commercials. So it's nice to have a balance of both. Cookbooks are where you might do, it might be 10 days, and you might do, say, a week in May, and then you might do a week in June. And then generally what happens is you'll get, say, it might be 100 recipes. You'll get those 100 recipes in, and then you'll sit down with the photographer, and you'll say, okay, which ones are we going to shoot? And then he or she will speak to the agency, and then I'll have to come back and I'll do a shop for the whole 4 days, and then make sure that everything's there. So, and make sure that everything's there for every day, and then on the day, cookbooks are quite a high volume days as well. So you're looking about 10 to 11 shots per day. Yeah. So, any questions on that lovely shot?
No, that's. I'm already like in my mind already making a collection of questions that I'm going to ask soon.
Okay, I'm a bit worried, but never mind. Okay. Okay. So, what have we got here? Oh, this is my show reel. Sorry, have you got the music there as well? Cool. Not too loud. I'll stop this for you as well. I'm not sure if I can stop it. Okay. Oops. Was that me? What have I done there? Oh, don't know what's happened there.
No worries.
Okay. I think it's probably, we'll blame it on technology, shall we?
Yes.
Okay. How are we going for time as well? Do I need to just slow down?
No, I think we're perfect. Spot on.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was a TV commercial, I guess.
So what this is show reel. This is essentially, it's a collection of of commercials that I've worked on. It's a bit like a folio. It's the same as a folio. So essentially, what you do is, when you're going out to work, to find work, when you get together a stills folio, and also you get together a show reel. And what that does is, as you all know, is it showcases the work that you've done, the work that you've enjoyed doing, and some of your best work. And it's quite nice to, when you're going out to meet people, meet photographers, as a food stylist, meeting photographers and meeting clients. It's good to be able to break down shots, essentially, a bit like what we're doing. So it's talking about each shot, when it was, who you worked with, who the photographer was, what the techniques you used to create the shot, and all that sort of thing, basically. And what that does, it kind of, it shows what you are and what you're made of, which is really good. Okay, let's have a look. What else have we got here? Okay, so this is some fairly recent stuff that I did for Pret. I worked with a photographer called Jamie Orlando Smith, and this was a Christmas campaign. And I really like these shots. I really like the props. I like the colours. It was quite good. The creative that we worked with really pushed the boundaries on this one with Pret. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble saying this, but I'll say it anyway. We were sort of, we were kind of pushing boundaries with the creative on this, because it was different to what they were used to doing, because we've gone a bit crazy with the colours, essentially. So, and the way that it was kind of put together was quite nice. Your mince pies sort of stacked up like that. You've got your kind of swirl there with the chocolate. This was a good one. This was a veggie. They released a veggie Christmas sandwich, and that was something new that they did for the campaign anyway, and it was very successful. And I don't know. I put in there because I quite like it. I quite like the way it's quite graphic.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the colors anyway. So a lot of images that I noticed that you've shown so far. I think the color contrast, sometimes even complementary color contrast. For example, the green set against the red or against an orange is absolutely vital. Do you actively think and consider like the color scheme, for example, when you select the different products?
Yes, I do. Not with every single shoot, but if there's a product, one of the questions I will ask is, particularly if we're not. Sometimes I do food. Trying to get my words out here. Sometimes I style food where the food isn't the main thing. So, for instance, if we're doing a drink and they require a food stylist to do the food, I will always ask what the color palette is, because generally they will have a color palette in terms of what the brand colors are. And I'll always ask them, I'll say, look, I can create poppy food for you. When I say poppy food that has lots of colors, or would you prefer me to create more peripheral food? So it's not all about the stuff in the background, it's more about the brand and the stuff in the foreground. So yes, that is one of the questions that I ask.
I see.
Okay. We're having a bit of a technical difficulty with that one there.
It's the band rate or the bandwidth. I think
must be the band.
that's just a bad connection.
Yeah. We'll move on from that one, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you would like to talk about, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. Let's have a look. So what else have we got here? Oh, there we go. This was an image that I worked on for St. Pierre Bakery. So they're kind of like this bespoke. They do like a brioche style sandwich loaf. They do buns. They do croissant. And I really like this image because it gave me the opportunity to build a kind of quite a high sandwich. And once again, you can really see the deliciousness of this shot. It looks edible. It looks yummy. It looks tasty. There's lots of you can see the dripping of the mayo there, and it's kind of it's kind of layered quite well, and you can see the different ingredients. This is you've got your chicken, your bacon, your avocado, your tomato. It's just a really yummy image.
Yeah. Do you use, in terms of your tools, do you use regular kitchen tools that, let's say, I would find at home in my kitchen, or do you use something special as a food stylist, or do you might even have your own secret tools that none of other food stylists could use?
Absolutely. So I've got quite a massive toolkit of different things I use. I've got my general kind of kitchen tools like your whisks and your knives and your spatulas and things like that. But I've also got things like tweezers, and I've got little spoons and little kind of almost dental tools that I use. For instance, say for this shot, we might have had this sandwich in set, and the photographer might have said to me, "Hey Costa, I think we need some mayonnaise just underneath that bit of bacon in the front there." So I'd kind of go, "Okay," and then I'd sort of walk over almost on my hands and knees with a pipette that's got some a bit of mayonnaise in it, and then I'd push a dental tool in. I'd lift it up, push the pipette in, give it a squeeze, just enough so that when you let the bacon down, it pushes the mayonnaise out.
Amazing.
It's
because it looks so, really often our imagination of reality is like a cliche of reality. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So if we think of a, let's say like some mayonnaise dripping out of the sandwich in the most succulent and delicious way, and we
yeah,
think, wow, that's actually like how a real, really nice, properly done sandwich actually looks like. And
yeah,
reality never looks like that. Basically, it's an imagination. It's a cliche in our mind. And to
yeah,
kind of think about, okay, what do people kind of expect to see? What do they associate with reality? And then to have that mayo actually kind of running down just in the perfect way is a
I
real
can see
art.
you're getting hungry, aren't you?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm not saying really, Kostas, really. I mean, we're just talking about about the about food here, like all the time. If one of our students is watching this tonight, then they just know what I mean. I mean, when we talk about branding, we don't
Yeah,
talk about the ordinary common photography. We're talking about restaurants, how to develop your own style, because
yeah,
it's something, food is something that everybody can relate to, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I know. I think that's the thing about this is it's kind of it's accessible. Everyone has a connection to it. You know, whether it be sandwiches or whether it be pasta or whether it's fruit or whatever. Everyone has a connection to food, and
Mhm.
um, that's why it's so popular within social media as well,
Mm,
and within photography and all forms of media. You know,
mm,
definitely. Okay, what else? What have we got here? Okay, and so this is a flat lay that I worked on. So this is chicken and pastas. This is packaging work that we did. I did this also with Jamie Orlando Smith. This was done for Waitrose Limited. Uh, so this is interesting to give you a point of view here. The way this was shot, so only the left half of this image would have been used for the packaging, and the packaging would have been on the yeah, it would have been on the left hand side. So the left hand corner of it would have been used, because on the other side they would have had all the yeah, um, that's because on the other side they would have had the text in terms of what it was. So everything had to, all the protein, here we go, getting technical, all the protein had to be on the left side, and all the accompaniment had to be on the right side. And also, so you know, it was we put it, when we'd shoot it, we'd have a look at it on screen, and if we felt, you know, the photographer and I talked about it together, and if he felt wasn't far over left, then I'd have to go back and restyle it again and push it over to the left, so that when it sat in the copy, it was in the right spot.
I see. Yeah, it's really
Uh,
beautiful with the asparagus cut halfway through.
Thank you
Amazing,
very
I
much.
must say. Really, it's just like that's the literally like the cherry on the cake, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Another question, really, I want to ask you. I mean, obviously, there are so many opinions and attitudes about food, and we've got Italians on the team as well, and also Italian students. And it's so interesting to talk about Italians, about food, about like the way they see it. And for example, this one here is a pasta dish. Yeah, do you sometimes have to, or is that like a big topic for you, the authenticity, um, the food, that this is kind of served in the right way? Just yesterday, I read on the Times an article about, I think it was the Sainsbury's had to apologize that they showed the scones with the jam and the clotted cream in an incorrect way. So apparently there are differences between Devon and then I think like Cornwall. I think one of them puts the cream on first and then the
Yeah,
jam,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the other way around. So obviously there's no wrong or right, but there was apparently like a huge uproar. Yeah,
Scone gates.
order basically, yeah. And is that like is that a theme, or is that like a thing for you? Like it has to be
Yeah,
like this and that?
yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, look, I've come up against the scone gate before as well on jobs, and I've, you know, vision. I think it's a visual interpretation, and the thing is, what you have to understand is, particularly with supermarkets, there are a lot of people out there that like to write letters to the supermarkets and to their brands, who have a close connection with their brands, and they like to tell them how things should be done. But I believe it's a visual interpretation, So when I've done scones in the past, I can't remember who it was for. It was cream on first and then jam on top, because visually that's what looks good. The way, your mum's told you how to do it, or your auntie or whoever put the jam on first and then the cream, well, that's great. But for me, it looks better this way, and I have to make that decision. But also, this is a really interesting point. As a food stylist, you've got to stand to your guns and say, I think we should do it this way because I think it'll look better. We can try it your way, but this is the way it's going to look the best, I think. And unless you've got, when you're working with a really good team, a really good photographer, a really good creative, and you're all in agreement, and there's no ego involved, it's all about creating something that's visually fantastic, you'll come into agreement. But if, you can only do your best. And if you turn around and say, listen, we should have the jam on the top, and they say, no, 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 the jam's got to be on the bottom, we just say, okay, cool, the jam's got to be on the bottom. So but yeah. Also, in terms of authenticity, I always try and give people what they want from the onset. So if you want authentic Italian food, I'll give you authentic Italian food, and I'll also give you an alternative. I'll also, because I know what's going on in terms of food trends and what looks good and what doesn't. I'll say, Holger, here's a list of things that I think are really cool. I also think this is really cool as well. And then I have to justify. I'll say, well, because I've done it before and it looks good on camera. And then, you might turn and say, okay, well, yeah, I like those ones. Let's give that one a try. And then, it's up to me, because that we're kind of, we have to push things a little bit. Otherwise, we'll just be doing the same old job, So, yeah. What else have we got here? Okay. So this is a really cool project I did with Waitrose, for Waitrose magazine last year in lockdown. I worked with food photographer and drinks photographer Lou Berger. So this is a project where we had to shoot mocktails, so cocktails with no alcohol, and cocktails. So we shot each individual cocktail, and then what they did is in post, they kind of matched them up. And it was a lot of fun. I got sent a massive big block of ice. And you can see there with the Negroni and the non-Negroni, the creative art director wanted a round block of ice. So I was a little bit worried about that. So I had to think on my feet, and I jumped on YouTube straight away, and I worked out how to kind of create one, and I did it there and then, and I think it looks pretty good.
How did you make it match so well? It almost looks as if it's the same chunk of ice. It probably is, I guess.
I think it might have been. I think what I might have done was, I think we might have shot the Negroni first, and then I might have taken it out, and then placed it back in again. But what I did do is I used a combination of fake ice and real ice. So there are a couple of different types of fake ice. You've got fake ice that sinks and fake ice that floats. So what I'll do sometimes, I'm not going to give any of my tricks away, but I'll, I'll use a little bit of fake ice and real ice to create the effect, because what the fake ice will do is kind of prop it up a bit. Yeah. So yeah, so that was quite a good job. And once again, that was a case of shooting each cocktail and then sending it off. Actually, no, we were doing we shared the screen, we shared screens. The photographer shared screens with the art director, so she could see what was going on as we were shooting. And yeah, it worked really well. It worked really well. That was a 2-day shoot we did. Yeah. Oh, sorry, it was a 1-day shoot. I love this. I love this.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice. It's like an iceberg in the middle there. It's really good.
Do you have like tricks to make the glass look just like you say, like a bit, to create a bit of
condensation,
like on the outside? Is there anything?
Yeah, I mean, there are things that you can use to create condensation, and I think, I mean, everyone sort of knows within the industry what you need to do that. I think it always helps if you've got cold product, but I can't give away my secrets.
No worries. You're talking to complete amateur here, so I'm not even aware when I'm crossing the line. Yeah, asking
no, it's okay. It's cool.
It's cool. To special question, but it looks absolutely amazing. Again, you can really feel this glass in your hand, right? I mean,
yeah. It feels cold, right?
Yeah. That's absolutely that's brilliant.
Yeah. We've got a little animation here. I did this. This is a local job, actually. It's really fun. This is a local job we did for a local pub, and this is with Malou Burger. And what we did was we did a certain amount of stills in the day, and at the end of the day, Malou said to me, "Why don't we do a little stop frame?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Let's do one." So we just kind of, moved the. Well, let's get it going again. I'll have to come out and come back in again. There we go. Oh, yeah, here we go. So we kind of moved it a little bit, took the shot, moved it a little bit, took the shot, and then it was just fun. And you know what? The client was really grateful that we gave that to him. And it was a kind of, when you do go that extra mile for the client, they appreciate it. And it might be the difference between them picking you and picking somebody else for the next job, because you go the extra mile. These are things that you have to kind of fathom out when you work for people. If you're going to go the extra mile, you think, okay, well, I think they're a good client. I like to work with them. I'll get some more work out of them. The stuff that you do is fun. So it kind of works that way. It works in roundabouts, really. And that's that. This one here was for Byron.
This is so cool, I must say. I mean, I think for still life photographers nowadays, motion is a really important thing, really important aspect of the work. maybe it's because also still life photography lends itself to motion really well because you're working in like in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
Lots of cameras nowadays have a really fantastic like a film function or film features, and you can always do stop motion basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, this was at the end of a shoot. Everything was kind of locked off, ready to go. Your lights are in place. It didn't take, famous last words, it didn't take that long to do. But it was, quantifying things. The client sees something like that, they go, oh, wow. It might be an extra half an hour or 45 minutes, and you might be completely, oh, God, I just want to get home. But actually, do you know what? You put the extra mile in, you give them something like this as well as the still shots. And they just go, wow, that's great. Let's get these guys in again,
Yeah.
commercially, it makes sense.
Yeah. What I want to ask you anyway is, let's say, like in photography, as a freelancer, you need to put a really considerable amount of effort into so-called personal work. So personal work is what we would use to define your own style. So that's uncompromising. You don't need to appease anyone. You don't need to,
No,
you're the reference. No compromises. You can create something that's as stunning as you like.
yeah,
Because very often a commission is a type of a compromise, maybe between the client, maybe the art director, maybe the photographer, and the food stylist in this case as well.
yeah.
Um, and whereas in personal work, yeah, as I said, you can be really completely uncompromising. You can make this as great as can be. Do you do something like that? Do you come up like with ideas where you create something that you say like, okay, I'm going to redefine food styling, redefine food photography? Or do you live out maybe any sort of like creative urge, maybe with those little, let's call them the extra mile that you actually kind of add on top of a job?
I think it's sometimes it's for me personally. I've done some tests in the past, early in the piece, when I was becoming a food stylist. I think it's super important to continue to test, because I think what it does is it develops your style. I think that as a freelancer, sometimes it's difficult to take the time out, but I think it's paramount for you to do it. You must take time out to test, because it keeps you fresh. You know, I'm quite busy, so I don't get as much. I don't allow myself enough time to test, because um, I'm working. I'm running a business. And I've got to continue to run my business. And if I start saying no to work, then my clients are going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're starting out, I think across the board, I think it's good to test. But I think if you're starting out, it's so important. It's also a really good opportunity for you to meet people, to meet like-minded people, to meet creative people who have a similar feel and have got similar ideas. And it's kind of like it is a foundation actually, because if you're all in the same position, if you're all starting out, photographers and food stylists and creatives all working together, then you're going to continue. If you develop those bonds, you'll continue to work together. So it's very important.
Mm.
Thank you.
I mean, what an amazing talk! I must say, really, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I've got a last question for you.
Yes.
Also
Yes.
seen from the perspective of our students. If one wanted to specialize in food photography, and obviously, like the food styling element is absolutely paramount here. So that means they would ideally start to collaborate maybe with a food stylist, but the more established food stylists might just simply, be on a different level. What type of tip would you give to young, emerging, talented food photographers to tackle that problem?
Look, I think it happens. I think it happens organically. I think my observations in the last sort of 10 years have been, I've worked with photographers and I've worked with their assistants, and it's quite interesting because I have assistants who help me, and if I go into a job with a photographer and he's got an assistant and I've got an assistant, what will happen is my assistant will talk to his assistant, and then if they get on and they become friends, then they'll say, "Hey, well, do you want to do some tests? Do you want to test?" You know, and I've got no objections. I've got no objections to that because I think that's within the high. Well, not so much a hierarchy, but I believe that you've got to get on. You've got to work, and you've got to do what you want to do, and you've got to be creative. So um, I would say, don't be afraid to make friends with people on shoots, and don't be afraid to ask. I think it's a little bit. You've got to be careful. If you're assisting a photographer, I wouldn't. I'm not sure whether it'd be good etiquette for you to approach the food stylist directly.
Mhm.
I think it's probably better etiquette for you to approach the assistant, and I would also always check in with the photographer beforehand as well,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
because in the past there have been situations where um, assistants have been a little bit too eager, and they've kind of asked someone, and then it's gotten back to the photographer, and then that assistant doesn't get work again.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
you've got to be humble, and you've got to know, you know, always check in with your photographer first. But by all means, you've got to ask, because if you don't ask, then you won't get what you want.
Yeah, it's really interesting you're mentioning that, because in another related field of the photography industry, fashion photography, the obviously like the stylists also in a very important position here, and the question also is like for a young photographer, young fashion photographer, how can you uh, start to collaborate with talented stylists? And it works just like that. For example, the assistants of the fashion photographers then start to collaborate with the assistants of the stylists.
Yeah,
Um, those assistants usually have access to, for example, like the outfits, the pieces, for
yeah,
example, that the
yeah,
stylists have been worked with anyway. So if the stylist assistant is on good terms, sorry, with their stylist, and the photographer's assistant is on good terms with their photographers,
yeah,
they might maybe, sometimes you use a similar infrastructure, maybe
yeah,
use certain kind of tools, and they can just organically start
yeah.
working together.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I've worked with assistants where, and photographers' assistants where I've worked with a photographer where he's let his assistant use the studio for a day, and he's let him use the camera. Let him use the Hasselblad, um, and so the assistant comes in, and the assistant photographer comes in, and they do some testing, and that's the way it used to be as well. And there's still, because there still is a bit of chivalry there, and I think that's really important to maintain.
Mm.
Um, you know, we're trying to sort of avoid that sort of cutthroat sort of mentality. I think because we're around for a while, so I think it's important to be humble.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for the talk today.